Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Street Fighter History of video. Crazy, isn't it? How we are now only 3 months away from Street Fighter 6's release. With that said, courtesy of last week's State of Play, we got a pretty damn big reveal with the return of Zangief, the debut of Lily, and of course, the center of today's video, the return of the lethal and exquisitely beautiful former Shadaloo doll, Killer B, aka Cammy White. Cammy has been a long-time staple character of the franchise all the way back since Street Fighter 2, and she has greatly evolved since her debut. First starting off as a simple puppet of Bison, designed to be his for the taking, before then, of course, acquiring her own freedom. But the fight does not quite end there, as she's forced to hunt down her own sisters, in the hopes of giving them the freedom they so righteously deserve. Her story is one of rebellion, one of defiance in the face of evil. It's a story that is very inspiring, showing that despite the sins of the father, or in this case, a psycho-infused maniacal dictator, anyone can defy their fate. So today, to talk about Cammy, we first have to dial things all the way back to Street Fighter Alpha 2. It allows us to understand who she is as a character and what we could possibly expect to see of her during Street Fighter 6 story mode. But before we do begin, if you're liking this video, as well as the rest of the Street Fighter coverage on this channel, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as well as subscribe and tick that bell. And if you're new here and eager to see more, we've actually already done 2 other episodes. That's being the history of Ryu and the history of Chun-Li. So I highly recommend giving those a watch too. Anywho, with that said, let's get right into things. Now, canonically, Cammy makes her first debut during the events of Street Fighter Alpha 2, being a part of the international crime syndicate, Shadaloo. But this wasn't exactly of her own volition. You see, Cammy herself is one of M.Bison's many dolls, young women who have been kidnapped and brainwashed into becoming his personal guards. Now, it is worth pointing out, in many different depictions of the dolls, some of them are either kidnapped women or actually synthetic clones of Bison himself. So some of the rules might apply to some here, whilst actually being a bit different for others. Either way, during the events of Alpha 2, Bison developed a keen interest in Cammy, as her capabilities made her a suitable vessel. At least, that is, if his body was to be destroyed. Whilst Bison was an almighty force, his psycho power did come at a cost. The price of his very own being. The unstable nature of it was quite literally tearing his body apart. Thus, Bison gained a deep interest in finding a suitable host that he could pass his essence onto. And that's where Cammy comes into play. Having proved her worth as an assassin, she would be dubbed by him as Killer B due to the lethality she brought to every mission. But the grip Bison had on Cammy would slowly release during the events of Alpha 2. Once she traveled across the world and encountered many different fighters, Cammy actually became self-aware and realized Bison's influence on her. With his control having faded, she would then turn her gaze on the dictator and blindside him, actually nearly killing him until his contingency plan kicked in. A strike of lightning that would temporarily paralyze Cammy. But instead of killing his puppet, he simply couldn't help but be impressed by the fruits of his labor. Thus, she would be brainwashed again, being put under her Killer B persona. But everything would change during the events of Street Fighter Alpha 3. Once again on the hunt, Killer B's hit list would take her to India, where she would cross paths with Dhalsim. Having sensed the struggle within her, Dhalsim uses his powers of enlightenment to free Cammy. So upon gaining clairvoyance, she would turn her sights back to Bison. But she is halted in her crusade by the likes of Vega, one of Bison's heavenly kings. Bisons, entrusted with the mission of killing Cammy should she break free of his control once again. Vega pounces at her, but the fight is no way near as easy as he believed it to be, severely underestimating Cammy's skills. So Vega is forced to retreat, licking his wounds, both mesmerized by her beauty as well as her defiance. When Cammy arrives at the Shadaloo base, she would then be confronted by two of her sisters, Julie and Junie. Still under the influence of Bison, they brand her as a traitor before trying to kill her. But Cammy knows all of their tricks, quickly knocking the two out. But as she finally turns her sights on Bison, she comes to learn of a horrible truth. How she is in fact an actual clone of Bison himself, and that each and every doll in fact shares a portion of his psycho power. So, if he dies, so do they. Knowing that it wasn't a bluff, Cammy tries to free as many of his sisters as possible from his snare, giving them a brief moment of freedom and actually encountering Chun-Li in the process. But as Bison is destroyed, all the dolls suddenly collapse, being rendered unconscious. But in near death, Cammy would be rescued by the most unlikely of figures, Vega. Enamored by her beauty, Vega relocates Cammy to the United Kingdom at the doorstep of a British military institution, Delta Red. Now, a bit of time does pass between the events of Alpha 3 and Street Fighter 2. Since then, Cammy's actually suffered from amnesia, robbed of her time of being Killer Bee. And luckily, during this period, she has been able to build a new life for herself, working alongside Delta Red and developing a very fond love towards cats. It's actually kind of paranormal. As time passes, she is reached out to by Chun-Li, having recognized who she is, and does assist in her recovery. So from this point onwards, the two actually develop an extremely close friendship. But the peace would not last, as during the events of Street Fighter 2, Bison would mysteriously return from the dead, seeking vengeance against those that played a part in his downfall. He organizes his own World Warrior tournament in the hopes to draw them all out. Now, whilst Cammy is unfamiliar with Bison, she can't help but naturally be drawn to him, sensing that he may have answers. Thus, she accepts his invite in the hopes of learning more of her past. And the veil is lifted during this tournament, but some secrets are better off lost. As once she confronts Bison, Cammy is horrified to learn of her past and just how much blood was on her hands. Whilst discouraged, she does still continue to pursue Bison, but simply cannot shake off her guilt. Fortunately, her teammates in Delta Red welcome her back with open arms, knowing full well these actions were not her own. With a regained sense of self-confidence, Cammy continues to pursue Bison, which does lead to a supposed death during the tournament, being blindsided by Akuma with a raging demon. In the aftermath of this all, Cammy learns to make peace with her Killer Bee past, looking to right those wrongs by making the world a safer place. But the fall of Bison doesn't necessarily mean the fall of Shadaloo, as its weapons division, Sin, would rise through the ranks and fill in where the crime syndicate had fallen off. With a new director, that being the android Seth, the organization begins to hunt down the world's strongest fighters, looking to harvest their ki and fighting capabilities. So during the ties that bind, Cammy, Gao, and Chun-Li begin to investigate the shadowy organization, not content with just the fall of Shadaloo. But it doesn't take long for them to realize that Seth's game plan, as he is hunting down Ryu, a talented lone warrior housing something known as the Dark Hado, an untapped source of power that Seth wanted to get his hands on. So as Guile and Chun-Li track down Sin's movements, Cammy would seek out Ryu, only to realize that it was too late. As once she locates Ryu, he's seen fighting one of Sin's assassins, Crimson Viper. Luckily, she is able to intervene, but underprepared for this encounter, Cammy is beaten into unconsciousness. That is, until a Dark Hodo infused Ryu does intervene. After this point, Cammy is then largely left absent during the rest of this prequel, but she does return during the Jury sequel, following Seth's defeat, and minor return of Shadaloo. Chun-Li, Guile, and Cammy once again go off to track down Sin and its remaining operatives, as Seth is having a new assassin cut off loose ends for the organization. And due to them now lurking in the shadows, it has made tracking them down extremely difficult. That is, until a theme park is attacked. Knowing that this was without a doubt them, Cammy and Guile travel out to save the bystanders, whilst Chun-Li tracks down the new assailant. But upon clearing the park, when they locate Chun-Li, they find her unconscious and in a critical condition, having been defeated by Jury. Whilst alive, Chun-Li is hospitalized, and with Jury gone, they're unable where to go next, until they are both tipped off by an unknown informant. One that tells them that Jury is in fact of the Bison's dolls. Shocked to learn that her sisters were in danger, Cammy immediately springs into action, but on their arrival, they realize they are far too late, as Jury has defeated them and is loading them onto her jet. A fight erupts between both sides, with Guile being injured during her onslaught. Now, Cammy is able to catch up to Jury, but still sadly does fail in saving her sisters, only being able to get Junie. So now, canonically, this brings us up to the events of Street Fighter 4, where Sin is organizing a new tournament of its own. So Cammy enters in the hopes of saving her sisters. But this is no simple task, as once again, she crosses paths with the likes of Jury, Sea Viper, and tragically, even one of her sisters, Decapre. Unlike the other dolls, Decapre has grown a bitter hatred towards her. But in the middle of this fight, Cammy realizes that Decapre is dying, being unable to save her. And in a horrible twist of fate, Cammy is actually forced to make the horrible decision to hand her over to Bison, the only person that is capable of saving her. Luckily, during this time, Sin and its facility is destroyed, but in its ashes, Shadaloo rises once more. So during the events of Street Fighter V, the organization has come back, utilizing the Black Moons, weapons of mass destruction, to cause chaos across the globe. Now, prior to the events of A Shadow's Fall, Street Fighter V's main narrative, we learn that after Sin's fall, Cammy, alongside Delta Red, have been aggressively hunting down Shadaloo, and this eventually takes her to India, where she crosses paths with Birdie, and then later comes across Fang, one of Bison's new lieutenants. Here, she is able to defeat him, but is not quite able to get the answers she so desperately desires, being forced to retreat from the overwhelming numbers. But as she returns to London, reuniting with the now free Junie, the pair would be ambushed by Vega. However, he does fail, and Cammy later comes to learn of their plans with the Black Moons. So she sets out once more to stop Shadaloo once and for all. Now, during the events of A Shadow's Fall, Bison finally begins his rampage, setting off the Black Moons and slowly crumbling the world. Now, this skirmish does catch the attention of Interpol, with both Chun-Li and Guile attacking the Dictator, but their overconfidence nearly costs them their lives, as they are defeated until Cammy intervenes, safely taking the two from danger. She then reveals to them the nature of Bison's Black Moons, and how she was entrusted with one of the keys to their detonators. She would then hand it over to Chun-Li so they could coordinate an attack. But as they do, they are ambushed by a third party. This one consisting of a recently resurrected Charlie Nash and Rashid of the Turbulent Winds. With Chun-Li injured, he is easily able to steal their key. So running out of options, Cammy rendezvous at the Kanzuki estate, where the young philanthropist is able to orchestrate a plan to travel across the globe and hunt down the remaining keys. But as this is being done, the estate would be attacked by Decapre and Mars. During this fight, Cammy is able to subdue her sister, but feels only guilt as she escapes. Once again, powerless to Bison's control. Once they arrive in Brazil, they do acquire another key, this time from Laura Matsuda. But upon doing so, they are once again confronted by Decapre, this time radiating with psycho power. Realizing the threat she poses, Cammy is forced to defeat her, leaving Decapre in an extremely fragile state. Things only get worse when the local authorities arrive, wanting to take Decapre into custody. So sick and tired of everyone's interference, Cammy rebels against the authorities, now being branded as a fugitive. And much to her surprise, during her escape, she would be assisted by Jury of all people. But once they arrive at Union Station, her sister awakens once again, completely unhinged and forcing Cammy to render her unconscious once more, much to the sick delight of Jury. But they soon learn they are not quite alone, being tracked down by Vega. And whilst he does defeat the very distraught Cammy, it is Jury who fends him off, then taking Cammy to Helena, a member of a secret society and leader of the third party in the war against Shadaloo. They promise to assist Decapre in exchange for her assistance. So during the final siege of Shadaloo, Cammy appears on the scene, fighting alongside her allies in the hopes of Bison's demise. But in the ensuing chaos, she would be struck down by Vega, having grown tired of her insolence. He does almost kill her, but his blade is deflected by a now cleansed Decapre. So she, Cammy, and Jury overwhelm the narcissist, as Ryu goes on to destroy Bison, obliterated by his Hadouken. So the dolls are finally free, and Shadaloo is finally destroyed. From this point onwards, Cammy actually goes on to continue her life in Delta Red, defending the world from any international threats. Although it is worth mentioning that she is completely absent during the events of Street Fighter 3. But with Street Fighter 6 on the horizon, and it having taken place quite a few years after the events of Gil and the Illuminati, it raises many questions as to what has happened to Cammy during this time, what has become of her sisters, and finally, what are her ties to the mysterious JP, the newest addition, Psycho Power Wielder. There's a lot there to explore. But for now everyone, that has been it for the history of Cammy. I hope you have enjoyed this video and learned more about Cammy as a character. She is a fan favorite, and well, we can both see why. But even with that said, I absolutely adore her redesign for 6, and I cannot wait to see and learn what has become of her since Shadaloo's fall. She's been my most hotly anticipated character since the reveal, and I can only imagine what the future holds for this character's return. But for now everyone, that has been it for me. So, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And also, the next Street Fighter episode will be on Ken Masters, since you lot enjoyed the Ryu one so much. So, as always everyone, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting, as we're less than 3 months away for Street Fighter 6's release. Take care everyone, I'll see you all soon.